Hey, what's up, everybody? Chris Trapasso here for Week 6 edition of All 32, the show in which I give you a film observation, a stat nugget, or just a general thought about all 32 teams after a given week. We just got done with Week 6. Tomorrow starts Week 7. We know there's only Tuesday, Wednesday are the only down days in terms of no football being on during the NFL season in week. And that's all I got for an introduction today. So I'm going to jump right in. I did AFC last week, so I started with the AFC last week. I'm going to start with the NFC this week. And as usual, I'll start with the NFC East. The Dallas Cowboys. Now, I don't want to repeat myself too often on all 32, but if what look like trends continue for a team or a specific player, I will circle back, and I have to do that with the Dallas Cowboys. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys defense, and maybe this is a low-hanging fruit, but I think it's just as much of a low-hanging fruit to talk about the offense. Right now, the Dallas Cowboys defense is last in the NFL in EPA per play allowed in non-garbage time situations, which is making this huge contrast between how good the offense is, even without CeeDee Lamb the last couple weeks. Dak Prescott is still playing great football. Javonte Williams is in the top, I believe, 5 or 7 in rushing yards overall in the NFL. George Pickens is looking like one of the best trades that we saw in the offseason. The offensive line is blocking very well. Kevontae Turpin's getting involved. Jalen Tolbert's getting involved. The tight ends. It looks like one of the league's truly best offenses. I don't want to say it looks like a top 2 or 3 offense, but close. I think top 5 is certainly up there, or certainly would make sense for the Cowboys. The defense, though, even though they are generating a fair amount of pass rush, James Houston is rushing the quarterback well. Sam Williams back from injury, same there. It's the back end. It's they can't stop the run. And in the back end, the cornerback room and the safety room have just not delivered quality performances really at all throughout this season. So they are dead last by a sizable margin too in EPA per play allowed entering week 7. They're 2-3-1. I heard Jerry Jones' comments this week that he is in no way, shape, or form thinking ahead to next season or counting out this team. And I can't blame him for that. I think the NFC is as wide open as it's ever been. And at 2-3-1, I mean, they were a literal second away from being 3-2 right now. And at that point, everyone would be thinking, hey, this is a Cowboys team that could fight for a wild card spot or maybe even win this division with the Eagles losing back-to-back games. So I don't blame Jerry Jones. I mean, a lot of times some of the things he says and a lot of his actions seem a little crazy. I don't blame him for that, though, because I think with how good this offense is, they can stay alive, stay in the hunt deep into this season. But the back 7 needs to play a lot better. And they need maybe someone to step up as that true number 1 defensive player along the defensive line. Maybe they have to play James Houston a little bit more, who's been a pass rushing specialist and really good in kind of a low volume role. So the Cowboys had to point it out again, what I thought and what we all kind of thought a few weeks ago, this might be the worst defense in football. It has remained that through 6 weeks, and it's holding back this team that is otherwise very explosive offensively and can certainly win games on its offense alone. Next team in the NFC East here on all 32, the Philadelphia Eagles. And I have a similar question, or it's related to the Cowboys when it comes to the Eagles. Where are they going to get their pass rush from? I think I posed this question a few weeks ago, or at least I created a TikTok video asking this exact question, because Nolan Smith could come back from injured reserve pretty soon. So that could be the boost that they need. But they just saw Zadarius Smith unexpectedly retire earlier this week. They lose Josh Sweat in free agency. They lose Milton Williams in free agency. Hassan Reddick is long gone. Bryce Huff didn't work out. Where are they going to get their pass rush in those key moments that even if the game script goes exactly how the Eagles want it, they run the football well, they get a lead, Jalen Hurts makes some plays, A.J. Brown makes some plays, they get ahead. Where is that defensive end or maybe even interior rusher outside of Jalen Carter that is going to end the game, that is going to be the finisher? On the last couple drives, you get a sack. And then on the last drive, you get a sack fumble, you recover it, the game's over. When you're facing the better teams that they will face later in the season and presumably in the playoffs, I'm very concerned about the Philadelphia Eagles pass rush at this point. Not that it's been terrible to date, but when your most efficient pass rushers are Zach Bond and Josh Uche, the latter of which is a very part-time role-playing defender on this defense, and Zadarius Smith was actually the player at edge who had the most pressures on your team going into week 7, and now he's retired. I think for a team that won the Super Bowl last year and has been to, 2 Super Bowls in the last 3 years, and everyone expected this could be another trip back to the Super Bowl for the Eagles, they are going to need a few players, maybe not just one, to step up and be good right away, or this is, I think, going to be a problem for this team when they're facing better quarterbacks in the regular season and certainly in the playoffs. Very quickly here, I'm going to tweet. Give me 1 second. Actually, no, I don't need to do that. Okay. Number 3, the third team here on all 32 in the NFC East, Washington Commanders. I'm going to flip over to the offensive side. I want to see more Jalen Lane involved in this offense and more Luke McCaffrey involved in this offense. In each of the last 2 Commanders games, Luke McCaffrey has 1 catch for an explosive play. It was a 50-yarder and a 30-plus yarder, has a touchdown. And then Jalen Lane, late in that fourth quarter, on the drive that ultimately put the Commanders ahead. They obviously squandered that lead on that final field goal drive by Caleb Williams and the Bears. But on that final drive for the Commanders, a nice double move on Tyreek Stevenson, who's a good man corner from Jalen Lane, comes down with the football for, I think, 37-yarder. I want to see those players utilized more. That's not to say that with Terry McLaurin being close to returning, I want him phased out of the offense. But I think at this stage, the reason why the Commanders haven't really taken off and taken that next step that I think a lot of their fans and a lot of media members thought, hey, if they take another step, they're getting to a Super Bowl. They were in the NFC title game last year. Jaden Daniels, I should say, looks the part. Looks like there's no regression that's happening. His arm strength, I think, looks even a little better. He's running the same way. He's making mostly good decisions. But at this stage of the season, we've barely seen Terry McLaurin. He's only played a few games. Didn't look quite himself. Deebo Samuel's been awesome. He's been really good in the Deebo Samuel role, getting the ball out of the backfield, creating after the catch. He's been as advertised. But where else? And really, Zach Ertz, into his almost late 30s at this point, has been awesome as that security blanket underneath, mid-30s. He's been good. But the Commanders need, and Jaden Daniels needs, secondary options in the receiver group. They've gotten it. They've gotten the Luke McCaffrey big play. They've seen a Jalen Lane splash play creation. They need to just involve those players more on a regular basis in the pass game. They've gone with the youth movement in the running back room with, obviously trading Brian Robinson and then the injury to Austin Eckler. Bill Krosky-Merritt's been sensational. So it's not like this is a coaching staff or a front office that's convinced that rookies shouldn't play right away or determined to not play those guys until they've earned their keep in the NFL. They're fine with playing those young guys. So Luke McCaffrey's not super young. He was a draft pick a few years ago. Jalen Lane is a rookie. I absolutely love Jalen Lane as a prospect. That maybe is factored into me mentioning him here. But it's not like I'm just banging the table for a guy who's been on the practice squad or who has barely played, and then when he's played, he hasn't produced. Jalen Lane has made some plays as a returner, and we saw it this past week against the Bears. Luke McCaffrey, the same thing. They both have big-time speed and big playability because of that speed and their twitchiness in the slot. So I want those 2 young receivers, 3 to 5 to 7 targets a game. I don't think would be out of the question for both of those young receivers in Washington. And the last team in the NFC East here on all 32, week 6 edition, the New York Giants. I have an interesting observation from watching the film and looking over the analytics. At corner, Cordell Flott has been drastically better than former first-round pick Deonte Banks. Now, a few years ago, that would have sounded crazy, although I did really like Cordell Flott, and my draft algorithm resin liked him a fair amount. And he was like a mid-rounder. I think he was a 4th or 5th round pick out of LSU. But Deonte Banks was the first rounder. He was the big-time tester, man coverage ability through the roof at Maryland. I liked him. I didn't adore him. I thought when they picked him made sense. They picked him in the back third of the first round just a few years ago. But Cordell Flott has only allowed 16 catches for 178 yards through these first few games, month and a half for the Giants. Deonte Banks has allowed over 300 yards in coverage. So it's just an interesting tidbit. I know it's kind of a quick one with the Giants. Cordell Flott has an interception. He has 4 pass breakups. Deonte Banks just has not stacked up in terms of being that other outside cornerback. Cordell Flott is supposed to be the other corner to Deonte Banks, but it's really been the other way around. They have Drew Phillips in the slot. I think his rookie season was a little bit overrated because it was more he was just a good tackler. The coverage really wasn't there, but I think he's solid. But Cordell Flott has been the better corner in this Giants defensive backfield, and they need Deonte Banks, the former first rounder, to play better football for this team that is kind of sort of staying alive after that big win in primetime over the Eagles in week 6. NFC North. I want to check in on Micah Parsons and the Green Bay Packers because he was obviously the biggest trade that we saw this offseason. The first week against the Bears or against the Lions was sensational. I posted, I think after week 2, that I thought Micah Parsons was going to win Defensive Player of the Year. Now, we haven't really seen and heard a lot of, he hasn't had a 4-sack game. It's been just kind of these ugly-ish, who's texting me? This ugly-ish type wins for the Packers the last few weeks. But checking in on Micah Parsons, I watched the film last night and this morning. Still looks sensational, and you probably see it on your social media every week. And I know that I used to see it from Cowboys fans and Cowboys media. Micah Parsons gets held more than any other edge rusher in the NFL. Now, I know a lot of Browns fans and Pittsburgh Steelers fans are going to say Myles Garrett and TJ Watt get held, Max Crosby in LA or in Las Vegas. There's a lot of rushers that are elite level players who certainly get held quite a bit. But I think because of his size and he's not as tall or as wide as some of those other rushers, it's just easier for the bigger bodied offensive tackles to kind of get their arms and hug Micah Parsons, but he's still generating a pressure on 16.6% of his pass rush snaps, which is awesome. He has 19 quarterback pressures in his last 3 games, including 10 in week 5. So he has been every bit the part as advertised, exactly what the Packers hoped that they were getting with trading as much as they did and signing him to a contract as expensive as they did in Micah Parsons. So wanted to check in on him 5 games into the Packers, or is it 5 or 6 games? I'm not sure if they had a bye. Wanted to check in on him, and he has still been really, really good. Micah Parsons, still to me, probably the best all-around edge rusher in the NFL. Minnesota Vikings. They're in a weird spot coming off the bye week. They have the Eagles this week. Do they start J.J. McCarthy? Do they roll with Carson Wentz again? I want to actually go to the defensive side because it's easy to talk about the quarterback situation. I think when J.J. McCarthy is healthy, he should play. And that maybe even the last few weeks of being injured where it just takes more time to sit in the practice room or in the meeting rooms and at practice, getting the ball out, trusting Kevin O'Connell, trusting your receivers, not trying to make the spectacular play, getting those sacks down, getting the pressure to sack rate below 40 where it is right now. Those are all important things for J.J. McCarthy. I also, though, want to focus on Brian Flores and the job that he does defensively. I probably mentioned this before, and it won't be the last time I'll say it. The lawsuit that he has hanging over his head with the NFL about all the discrimination with his head coaching stint in Miami might be a deterrent for a team to hire him as a head coach. But man, he has, if you forget that and you're not concerned about that, you look at the performances of his defense, should be the hottest head coach coming from the defensive side, head coach candidate. I know it's early and not a lot of teams outside of the Tennessee Titans are talking about this or thinking about this right now, but the Minnesota Vikings for the last 3 or 4 years have been sensational on defense. Right now, they are first in EPA per play allowed on defense in non-garbage time from week 1 through week 6. And it's not really a defense that changed a lot. They lost some pieces in the secondary. They lost Cam Bynum to the Colts, but they added Jonathan Allen. They added Javon Hargrave. They have some weaknesses. Maybe at linebacker, they're playing Eric Wilson. At safety linebacker, they have Ivan Pace. They haven't had Blake Cashman. He could be returning soon. I think he's going to be a huge help to be that just traditional coverage linebacker for Brian Flores. But despite that, still Andrew Van Ginkel, Jonathan Grenard's great. Dallas Turner's taking a step. My undrafted guy, Jalen Redmond, has been sensational, has really stepped up his pass rush game from being an awesome run stuffer as a rookie or in his first season in the NFL last year. But first in EPA per play on defense, that more so than getting Carson Wentz to win a game and lose a game and not go 0-2. I think the defense more so than Carson Wentz is the reason why the Vikings, it's still early for every team, but that they didn't see their season just kind of go in the gutter after J.J. McCarthy got hurt in that second game. Detroit Lions, next team here on All 32, staying in the NFC North. They're coming off a loss in primetime to the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs felt like the better team throughout that game, and it felt like moving the football for them was a little easier, making plays on defense a little easier. And in the NFL, especially when you're facing a good team with a Hall of Fame head coach and a Hall of Fame quarterback in Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes, that's how you can lose a 14-point game. But despite that, it felt easier and that the Chiefs were the better team. There were a few plays here and there where that could have been a completely different contest. I don't think the Lions should feel, man, we failed our first big test across a conference against a team that's won the Super Bowl that if we want to get to the Super Bowl, we may have to face in the Super Bowl, and that we played the Packers in week 1. We failed that test. I think this team, still averaging almost 32 points a game, second in the NFL right now, has looked as good as any team in the NFL for the last month. And that is even considering only scoring 17 points and losing that game 31-17 to the Kansas City Chiefs at home on Sunday night, or on the road on Sunday Night Football. I think the run game can really get going. I like how they flip-flop Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery to keep them fresh. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a couple very uncharacteristic drops in that game. Sam Laporta is starting to take off. Jameson Williams is starting to look like not just a big play threat. He can be, I don't want to say high volume, like you're not going to feed Jameson Williams 13 targets a game, but he's not just catching 3 passes for 80 yards. He proved that he can make big plays and be a mid-level target, intermediate level target. So I think this team, especially on offense, the defense is playing mostly good football, dealing with some injuries again, but I don't think the injuries will ever get to the level that they were last year. I think the Lions are going to be fine. I think they're still very, very good and one of the NFC and one of the NFL's best teams. The last team on All 32 here in the NFC North, Chicago Bears. I want to see more Luther Burden. I want to see him involved more. There's nothing against Olamide Zaccheaus. He's a veteran. I understand when you have someone that has played multiple seasons, you've seen film of them in the NFL, they're more reliable. They maybe have a better grasp of just offensive philosophies and concepts. I understand why Zaccheaus was the starting slot receiver to begin the season for Ben Johnson. I do. I understand that. And it makes sense. Luther Burden is just drastically more talented. We saw on that 30-plus yarder deep over against the Washington Commanders, he not only created separation off the line at the top of the route stem, he catches the football, accelerates toward the sideline, and then cuts back against the grain where he was clearly the quickest player in his vicinity, and then cuts back again to create extra yards. He is so good after the catch. He's still not 22 years old, 6 foot, 206. I want to see him utilized more in this Bears offense. And very quickly on the Bears, 2 tidbits here for Chicago. DeAndre Swift is really starting to take off. Like, we should have realized Ben Johnson and the run game went hand in hand in Detroit, that it was Jahmyr Gibbs, It was David Montgomery. And I think Ben Johnson himself and what all of his plans and all of his creativity for the Lions run game was a big reason why, and was maybe a push for the Lions picking Jahmyr Gibbs in that first round, when it kind of was like, are you sure you should pick a running back in the first round? Well, that one worked out in terms of the player that they got. He is with the outside pitches, with so many different moving parts up front. He's starting to get that level of production from the Bears offensive line that is actually, I think, pretty good. It's not to the level of the Lions the last couple of years, but it's pretty darn good. Darnell Wright at right tackle has been awesome. And they invested heavily in the offensive line. Joe Thuney, Jonah Jackson next to Darnell Wright, very, very good. We saw that what dividends can be paid from the running back in Ben Johnson's offense. DeAndre Swift was a big reason why the Bears won that game. 175 yards from scrimmage, including that big run to get the Bears into field goal range to win that game. So I want to see more Luther Burden, and let's keep monitoring DeAndre Swift, because I think he is in for probably a pretty big second half of the season for the Chicago Bears. All right, moving divisions now here on the Week 6 edition of All 32, the show in which I give you a stat nugget, a film observation, or just a general thought for all 32 teams on a weekly basis in the NFL. Let's go to the NFC South, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're 5-1. Right now, I think a lot of people would agree. If you polled 1,000 people, I think most of the responses, or the highest percentage of responses, would be, if you asked who is the best team, which team is the best team in the NFC, you would probably get the most answers as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They only lost to the Eagles. They had those 4 straight last-second victories. They won last week over kind of an injury-depleted 49ers team. But you can only beat the teams that are on your schedule. You can't face, a great litmus test of a past Super Bowl team every single week. Baker Mayfield's playing outstanding football. He's in the MVP race through 6 games. But I want to focus on Vita Vea. He's still really good. I mean, he's getting up there in age, especially for nose tackles. I mean, nose tackles can hang around for a little bit of time into their, a little bit longer than other positions. They can be run stuffers. They're big bodies. If they lose some of their athleticism, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But Vita Vea had 5 pressures against the 49ers, and they were all highlight reel pressures. He was awesome against the run. He generated a pressure on close to 14% of his snaps, pass rush snaps, against the 49ers, which still has a pretty good offensive front. And there aren't many. There's 3 to 4. There's Dexter Lawrence, Nnamdi Madubuike, and probably Vita Vea in terms of just classic wide body, 330, 340 plus pound nose tackles who can generate consistent push as pass rushers. He was a first round pick in 2018, so he's probably 29 years old, somewhere in that range. Still really, really good. And I think the true anchor, both in terms of where he's positioned in the middle of the defense and just philosophically and mentally for this team, he is the true anchor of what is still, again, a very solid Todd Bowles defense in Tampa Bay. All right, next team here on All 32 in the NFC South, Atlanta Falcons. Just want to say this. It's insane about the Falcons that Bijan Robinson is that entire offense. The Bills knew Bijan Robinson and Drake London were going to be the entire offense, and they could not stop either of those players. Bijan Robinson had 14 missed tackles, which is an astronomical number, as a running back and a receiver against Buffalo. What I like, too, is that he forces those missed tackles, and this was not just against the Bills, but we've seen this early in his NFL career, and especially, I think, this season. He's not constantly dancing. It's not like he's trying to create a viral play on every time he touches the ball. On that 81-yard touchdown, he was patient on that outside zone, slipped through the cracks, then hit the accelerators, used his contact balance and speed to hit that 81-yard score. So it's kind of a gimmicky offense. It's pistol-based. We don't really see that in the NFL outside of Atlanta. A lot of motion. Bijan starts in the slot, then he motions behind Michael Penix, then he motions to the other side. I think they need to diversify a little bit on offense, but when you have someone as supremely gifted in the prime of his career like Bijan Robinson, I'm okay with you having kind of a gimmicky offense that tries to feature him as much as possible. The only thing I hope doesn't happen for this Falcons team and for Bijan is that even though he is very young, he's like 23 years old, that he's not run into the ground, not even just for the longevity of his career, thinking of that. I'm thinking this season that I don't want to see the Falcons be close to maybe winning an NFC South title, and then he's injured or he's not the same level of explosive because he's at like 400 or 350 touches, something like that, before the end of the regular season. The other point, which is probably more important, truly, for the Atlanta Falcons, we knew Bijan was going to be good. We knew Drake London was going to be good. From week 2 to week 6, so let's not count week 1, which I know that's cherry picking a little, but let's not count week 1. From week 2 to week 6, in non-garbage time situations, the Falcons are first in EPA per play allowed on defense. And that has been the biggest problem with this team in the post-Matt Ryan era. I mean, the quarterbacks have not been good. They've tried to find their quarterback. Maybe they have it with Penix. Maybe they don't. But in some of those games where, last year Kirk Cousins played well, or there were times that other quarterbacks played decent enough to get wins, the defense and particularly the pass rush just were not up to snuff. And I think their defensive coordinator, Jeff Albrecht, has done a great job with this team. And frankly, I don't want to be just that guy that speaks out of both sides of my mouth, because I mostly will say and usually say the personnel matters more than anything else. Hats off to the GM, Terry Fontenot, for double dipping Jalen Walker, James Pierce on the edge in round 1. Caden Ellis has been this really fun, like movable chess piece blitzer coverage guy. They still have Jesse Bates there. Xavier Watts wins Defensive Rookie of the Month in September at safety. Very instinctive. And we saw that at Notre Dame. I was a big fan of his because he had 13 interceptions the past 2 seasons for the Fighting Irish. They still have A.J. Terrell, who can lock you down in man coverage. I'm a little concerned about the other corner spot. Mike Hughes is not really the answer there. But number 1 team in EPA per play the last month, the Atlanta Falcons. And I think that's a big reason this team is starting to get a little bit momentum heading into the middle portion of October. The next team in the NFC South here on all 32, Carolina Panthers. I do not know what to do with Bryce Young, because last season he blew me away with how good he was after getting benched for Andy Dalton. I think he blew everyone away. He actually played some darn good football down the stretch on a team that really wasn't, in the playoff hunt, but he himself individually, for just isolating Bryce Young, looked great last year. So, they draft Ted McMillan in the first round, the consensus best pure receiver in this class, inside the top 10. And they got a trade offer with the Los Angeles Rams to move out of that pick. They said, no, we're not going to do it, because they really wanted that number 1 outside receiver for Bryce Young. Then the start of this season didn't look great. And the traits, to me, it's going to be hard for me to ever be fully convinced about Bryce Young that he's the answer for this organization, because he's small. He is a little bit shifty. He's not crazy explosive or super fast, and he doesn't have a strong arm, but the anticipation is certainly there. He does kind of have a flair to create those plays off structure or find a receiver who doesn't seem to be open. There was a stretch, early in the season in September where Bryce Young didn't look very good. And it looked like, man, they're kind of delaying the inevitable here, that he's just not the answer. The last 3 weeks, though, his yards per attempt average in each of those games has gone up. However, I'm going back and forth here to prove my point. I don't know what to do with him. The last 2 weeks, he was very good, but he faced the Miami Dolphins defense and the Dallas Cowboys defense, the 2 defenses that, in my opinion, and I said this before those games, the 2 worst defenses in the NFL. So maybe that's what Bryce Young needed. Maybe he just needed a confidence boost. Maybe that's what Dave Canales and, Rico Dowdle, who suddenly looks like Saquon Barkley, maybe that's what they needed. But I'm going to be paying close attention the next few weeks, because they're not going to see the Miami Dolphins and the Dallas Cowboys defense too frequently. I just don't know what to do with Bryce Young yet, but I did want to just paint the entire picture of how the feeling that I've gotten watching him through these first 6 games for Carolina. And the last team on the NFC South side of things here on all 32, the New Orleans Saints. Like I thought a few weeks ago, and I'm not going to suggest that I'm right with all my predictions, but I really put a lot of time and effort into my predictions, team-wise, NFL draft-wise, player-wise. Like I predicted a few weeks ago, the Saints are pesky. They're an annoying team to play because Spencer Rattler has quarterback amnesia. He does not care what happened on the last drive. He's decently talented, even by NFL standards today. They have a fair amount of skill position talent. I mean, more than what you would think for a 1-5 team. And even though the defense doesn't have a lot of in their prime superstars or really any, Carl Granderson is darn good at edge. He's in his late 20s. Demario Davis, even in his mid to late 30s, still playing great football. Cam Jordan, same thing. And then they have some young players like Jonas Sanker, Kool-Aid McKinstry, guys who can make some plays in the secondary. But what I wonder is, are they going to be sellers at the trade deadline? Like getting close but losing to the Bills. Okay, that's maybe a silver lining. Winning that insane, or winning what they won the last 2 weeks ago. They beat the Giants. I was thinking of the Titans, who also won crazily in week 5. They beat the Giants at home pretty handily. And then they were right there with the New England Patriots, like one of the hottest teams in football, if not the hottest team in football, and the hottest quarterback in football right now in Drake May. They lost by 6. They were there that entire game. Do they take the last 3 weeks and think, hey, maybe we have something here. Let's keep the band together a little bit. Let's not remove some of these parts from the beginning of the Kellen Moore era at the head coach position? Or do they say, look, we are close to being in cap hell. We're hanging on by a thread on defense. I mentioned Demario Davis is in his late 30s. Cam Jordan's in his late 30s. What are they? I mean, Carl Granderson already has his contract extension, but do they ultimately make a trade over the next couple of weeks? It seems as though, and I don't know if, I mean, as I've been recording, if there's been, other trades. We had 3 last week, and Adam Schefter hinted that we are going to see more trades leading up to the trade deadline, not just on trade deadline day. He made it seem like it would be a weekly occurrence leading up until that trade deadline around Halloween. To me, it would be Rashid Shaheed, I think, could get them the most in return. He's relatively young. He had the knee injury last year, but he's proven he's one of the truly fastest players in the NFL at receiver. Chris Olave, very good, separator, bunch of concussions, but he is playing on the final year of his rookie deal, so it's not a big cost expenditure for a team now. And then that team that would ultimately get Chris Olave can decide, hey, we're going to watch him play the last 8 to 9 to 10 games with us, and then we'll make a decision and a determination of how much, should we extend him, how much. He's still very young too. He's younger than Rashid Shaheed. Could Carl Granderson get traded for a team that needs edge rushing help? Could that be the Washington Commanders? Could it be the Philadelphia Eagles? We know Howie Roseman is not afraid to make a big swing. Brandon Cooks, maybe even for a team that just needs a little bit of a jolt. I think they'll be sellers. I would be surprised. Or Alvin Kamara. They have Kendre Miller behind him. He's not really getting much value behind Alvin Kamara. Although the one bit about Kamara and why I didn't mention him right away, Nick Underhill, who's been covering the Saints for a long time now, I saw a tweet from him that was like, I get the impression that Alvin Kamara is a player that really wants to just play for one team in the NFL. He was like stressing it in this tweet. This is obviously paraphrasing, but he was like, yeah, I think he would rather retire than go anywhere else. Maybe that's the case. Maybe he just loves New Orleans and doesn't want to leave. But I would be surprised if the Saints don't ultimately trade someone before the trade deadline. All right, last division here on the NFC side of all 32, San Francisco 49ers. I'll be quick with them because if you're a 49ers fan right now, you're like, oh my God, how this is a recurring nightmare. When we're healthy, we're in the Super Bowl. And when we're not in the Super Bowl, we are like the most injured team in the NFL. Nick Bosa goes down a few weeks ago, torn ACL, done for the year. In the loss to the Buccaneers that felt very competitive early on, Fred Warner breaks his leg, fractures a bone, done for the year. George Kittle still has not returned from injury. Brandon Ayuk has still not returned from injury. Brock Purdy has missed many games at this point, although they've gotten pretty solid play from Mac Jones in his absence. Deebo Samuel is on the Commanders. Christian McCaffrey, at this point, if you're a 49ers fan, are you like nervous every time Christian McCaffrey touches the football because you're wondering when he's going to get hurt? Because he obviously has injury history. He has a ton of mileage on his legs at this point, and they're just feeding him the football routinely. To me, it will be the ultimate Kyle Shanahan test, which I don't think he needs to pass the test to keep his job or anything like that. But watching the 49ers, Jawan Jennings has been hurt. I totally forgot about him. Ricky Pearsall's been hurt. Like, it's insane how many injuries they have to not just like backup safeties or the number 2 corner, to like their stars. It's incredible. It will be the ultimate test, though, for Kyle Shanahan. How good? Who's calling me? I got to wait 1 second. 1 second. Okay, sorry. How good can you scheme it up? How well can you get this team to play if you're fielding a second and third team, essentially? So I think Kyle Shanahan is up for it. I will not be surprised if the 49ers remain in a lot of football games and win a fair amount of football games this season. But I think more so than any other like case study that you can get in a season, I think back to like the opposite, where Peyton Manning and the Colts were this juggernaut. Peyton Manning hurts his neck and the Colts go 2-14. And it's like, man, that was the ultimate show that Peyton Manning was the glue that kept that team together. We're going to get the opposite. We're going to get the players are all gone. How good and how impactful and important is the coach? And I've long thought, along with a lot of other people, that Kyle Shanahan is one of the best coaches in terms of offensive play designing and play calling in the NFL. So I'm really fascinated to watch this case study unfold before our eyes this season in San Francisco. Arizona Cardinals. Is Jacoby Brissett better in this offense than Kyler Murray? I mean, it felt like that. It felt like that this past weekend. That, yes, it's a 1-game sample compared to a 4 or 5 game sample, but Jacoby Brissett's average depth of target was higher. He threw for over 300 yards, which Kyler Murray has not done this season, against a pretty damn good Colts defense. And it's just seemed like the offense was more on schedule. He wasn't taking as many sacks. His pressure to sack rate was only 9.1%, which Kyler Murray's like always hovering around 20. So he's like, Kyler Murray, just by these very small sample numbers, Kyler Murray is like twice as likely to be sacked when he's pressured than what we saw in that first start for Jacoby Brissett. Now, overall, I think most of you are probably either typing in the comments or saying no, like in your head, no. Kyler Murray is not worse than Jacoby Brissett. He needs to be the quarterback when he's healthy. While that's probably true, and there's been a longer sample of Kyler Murray playing better football than Brissett, I think the 320 yards last week in the narrow defeat to the Colts was good enough for Jacoby Brissett, for Jonathan Gannon and his coaching staff to say, you know what? We don't really need to rush Kyler Murray back onto the field. We need to make sure he is 100% healthy, because we have Jacoby Brissett, who has long been like the league's ultimate stopgap quarterback, that proved that within this offense, he can play on schedule quality football. LA Rams. I'm a little concerned about the Rams in that, which you could pick apart. And like, you know, all teams, there's holes that every team has. Every team has flaws. And so much of what I've done on this show and on Twitter and on TikTok praise the Rams. I do truly think they are still one of the NFC's elite teams for sure. Sean McVay's an awesome coach. Stafford's been there, done that. They have Puka Nacua. They have a great defense. They have very ferocious front seven. Some decent players in the secondary, but really a defense that is led by its defensive front seven. And I'm still a big proponent of that. But going back to Puka, I'm a little concerned that this offense is too Puka-centric. And for as tough as he is, he's come back from injuries and you know, he's had been in the medical tent multiple times and come back. He got hurt last week, came back to the game. Puka Nacua has 54 catches. Davante Adams is second on the team at receiver with 26 catches. Puka almost has more than double the amount of receptions than the next highest receiver in this Los Angeles offense. After that, Jordan Whittington with 10 catches. So for as much as Puka, which is kind of the idea that I was getting at earlier, for as much as Puka is tough as nails, and I'm never going to be one that's going to predict an injury, but we've seen a lot of injuries early in Puka Nacua's career. Is it going to get to a point where he is out a couple games, and then what happens to the offense? I mean, Davante Adams has been a funnel the offense through me type of number one receiver in his past, but now at 32, can he still be that guy, and can the offense operate as well? I'm not quite sure. I'd like to see more Terrence Ferguson, the rookie tight end, involved in the offense. Maybe more. Kyron Williams had a couple touchdowns last week. I want to see more of a running back by committee approach, some Blake Corum, the rookie from Auburn that they drafted. I want to see more run game emphasis if Puka Nacua is not on the field. Puka Nacua is an elite receiver. He's probably going to be an all-pro again. But the disparity in just the overall amount of catches between him and Davante Adams, I think, is a little bit scary, and it makes you feel like this offense and this team is a little bit more fragile than some of the other top contenders in the entire NFL, which I think the Rams still are. All right, Seattle Seahawks, last team on the NFC side here on Week 6 edition of the All 32 show. Sam Darnold. I am blown away by what Sam Darnold has done to start his Seattle Seahawks career. I was a believer that, okay, last year it's Kevin O'Connell, it's Justin Jefferson, it's Jordan Addison, it's TJ Hawkinson, it's a low-key elite level offensive line, it's a great run game, Aaron Jones over 1,100 yards, a good defense that wasn't putting him in a lot of bad situations. And then those last couple games, they were a little bit more injured. The defense got in some holes, and we saw like New York Jets and Carolina Panthers Sam Darnold. But in Seattle, with maybe a better supporting cast than a lot of us thought, including myself, he has 13 big-time throws to just 2 turnover-worthy plays through these first 6 weeks of the season. So Sam Darnold has really picked up, I don't want to say right where he left off because he kind of left on a sour note in Minnesota last year, but he has picked up where we saw him for the majority of the 2024 season, playing on time, playing with, throwing accurately to all levels of the field. And I think, now he's not Justin Jefferson, but I think Jackson Smith and Jigba has moved into that elite level receiver category that might be what Sam Darnold needs to ultimately operate like an efficient passer that he has been through these first 6 games. And if he continues to play this well, and I don't know if this is sustainable because he's playing at an MVP level, truly, then the Seattle Seahawks are going to be in contention and are probably going to win the NFC West. The defense is sneaky good. The offensive line, sneaky good. You have 2 good running backs. You have an elite level receiver. You have some decent compliments at tight end. You have Torrey Horton, the rookie. It's really been fascinating, and I will be the first to admit that I was wrong, at least through 6 weeks on Sam Darnold, that I did not think he was going to hit as emphatically as he has in these first 6 games in Seattle. All right, AFC side of All 32, and if you're just joining, thank you for watching All 32. This is the weekly show that I do that gives you a stat nugget, film observation, just a general thought on a specific player, or just a general feel that I have for all 32 teams in the NFL. I'm going to be a little bit quicker here. I went a little over what I'm intending. I want to do 30 minutes aside in terms of conference by conference. I'm at 43 minutes now, almost 44 minutes. So I'll be a little quicker with the AFC, but I will not, leave out any data or any of my observations. Buffalo Bills. We're starting with the AFC East. Buffalo Bills, I think they have a problem with Keon Coleman. His yards per route run is down. It was like 4.5 or 1.55 last year. It's down to 1.35, which you want to be close to 2. If you're at 2 or above, you're producing at a pretty high level in terms of your efficiency at receiver. If you're close to 1, if you're at 1.5, it's kind of like replacement level. And all the things that I thought, and many people that were in the draft field thought about Keon Coleman, have looked to be true through 1 season and 6 games into his NFL career. Once in a while, he'll make a ridiculous, back shoulder contested catch, and then he'll have 2 or 3 that he ultimately doesn't make. He's 1 of 5 in his last 5 contested catch situations. Only come down with 1 of those. He got completely locked down by A.J. Terrell. He had a big fumble inside his own red zone in the Sunday Night Football loss the week before to the Patriots. And maybe he's separating at a little bit of a better rate than he did last year, but he was like the worst separator, or one of the 2 or 3 worst separators on a route to route or a play-to-play, route-to-route basis as a rookie. So Keon Coleman, he's not generating much after the catch either. So I think the Bills have a problem there. I don't know if that will spark any movement for the Bills. I mean, they just invested the 33rd overall pick in him in 2024. I don't think they're going to necessarily bench him. I don't think they're going to trade for a receiver and then suddenly Keon Coleman is not going to play. But they just need better play. This offense, which the last 2 weeks, for as bad as the defense has been at times for Buffalo, they've been in the last 2 games in the second half, and the offense, surprisingly and very uncharacteristically, has kind of let the Bills down, that they can't move the ball through the air super efficiently, even with a superhero in Josh Allen at quarterback, the reigning MVP. Keon Coleman, I think, is a big reason why, because you look around the league, you have your Ladd McConkeys, and you have, not picked in the same round, but later stages of the first round, Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy making plays, I mean, not to an extreme level, but making more plays in Kansas City. Maybe, Xavier Legette, not so much in Carolina. Ricky Pearsall was making plays before getting injured. These are all of the other wide receiver in the 2024 class contemporaries for Keon Coleman. A.D. Mitchell was a healthy scratch last week. So it's been about 50-50, but I think whether they need to move him into the slot or he needs to dedicate himself more, or they need to try to find different ways to get him the football besides just throwing him jump balls, which he was never really great at Florida State anyway. The Bills need better play from Keon Coleman. Miami Dolphins. I asked this question for one team on the NFC side, and this is going to be my AFC team I'm going to ask it about. Will the Miami Dolphins be sellers at the trade deadline? They're in a weird spot because Mike McDaniel feels like he is distinctly on the hot seat. I think their GM, Chris Greer, seems like he is distinctly on the hot seat. I mean, they've made the playoffs with those two. They've never won a playoff game with either of those two. The one year Tua was hurt, they had to start a third-string quarterback against the Bills. They lost that game. It was a tight game, but they lost. Then they lose in Kansas City in that, minus 20-degree game, whatever it was. But the offense, the whole team just looked flat. So would that mean that even though this team at 1-5 with not a very good defense at all, and to me one of the 2 worst defenses in football, do they say, well, we got to keep these good players. We got to try to win as many games as we can to potentially keep our jobs? Or do they have some job security? Maybe it's just Chris Greer, the GM, has job security, and he's like, we need to start building for next year. We need to shed some of these expensive contracts, Bradley Chubb, maybe even Minkah Fitzpatrick, who they just traded Jalen Ramsey for, Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, which obviously the team's not going to necessarily trade for Tyreek Hill after, he's done for the year and he's into his 30s now. But I just wonder what happens with the Miami Dolphins. They've been in some close games. They've looked lethargic and out of games at times, but they are 1-5. They don't feel really close to contending in the AFC. But I just wonder if the head coach and especially the GM try to keep as much of their talent as they can to try to win as many games as possible to keep their job. So that's another team on the AFC side. The Saints on the NFC side, the Dolphins on the AFC side. Will they be sellers from like now until the trade deadline close to Halloween? New England Patriots. We talk about Drake May till I'm blue in the face. He has like 5 straight games with a quarterback rating over 100. He's been awesome. I want to focus my attention on the defensive side. Christian Barmore, former second-round pick out of Alabama, dealt with, I believe, blood clots last year, so couldn't play really at all or that much. He has been awesome. Like Milton Williams was the big ticket signing at defensive tackle, and he's been very good too. Harold Landry on the edge has also played pretty good football. But Christian Barmore has a pressure rate of 18.4% in his last 3 games at defensive tackle. That is like elite level edge rusher type pressure rate. And he's doing that at defensive tackle. He was like a 1-year wonder, but really was only on the field 1 full season as a full-time player at Alabama. Tested very well. It was a great draft pick late in the Belichick era. I believe that was still Belichick. And he's been awesome. So hats off to Christian Barmore coming back from the injury and the health condition that he had a season ago. He has been every bit as good, if not even a little better than Milton Williams in these first 6 games for the Patriots. New York Jets. I guess another team I want to mention. I was going to say there was only one, but I didn't look ahead to my notes. Are they going to be sellers at the trade deadline? They seem like the team that is most disorganized or dysfunctional or furthest away from contending, which would make sense. They don't have a win yet. But they can't, right? They can't sell away all of their assets. They just extended Sauce Gardner. He's not going anywhere. They just extended Garrett Wilson, both of which got a lot of praise. Like, hey, this new GM, Darren Muge, their new head coach, Aaron Glenn, they want to keep the really good players around for a long time and start building this team. But does Breece Hall get traded? I mean, he has looked like a shell of his former self. He's like regressed in all of his 4 seasons with the New York Jets. I almost said New England Patriots. With the New York Jets. Still explosive. He's dealt with injuries, which maybe that sapped a little bit of his explosiveness, but he is on the final year of his rookie deal as a second rounder. This is his 4th year in the NFL. I would actually be surprised if Breece Hall is not traded by the Jets. I mean, they don't have, if Braylon Allen was healthy, I think a trade probably would have happened already, but they do have Isaiah Davis. They have some other guys that they can roll out there. I just wonder if, again, first-year GM, first-year head coach, like 6 or 7 games into their first seasons in those respective roles, they're suddenly going to trade away people. I don't know if that ultimately happens. The defense has played okay, but not up to the level that it should, given Quincy Williams, Will McDonald, Sauce Gardner, Jermaine Johnson, who played well a few years ago, is coming back from an injury. But that's another team. It's hard to peg because there's not a clear cut, oh my God, they need to be sellers, but maybe the Jets ultimately do. All right, moving to the AFC North, Cincinnati Bengals. They need more help from the edge rusher group. They have Trey Hendrickson. He's the man. He is awesome. He is an elite level rusher. He left their week 6 loss with a back injury. Beyond him, the trio of Joseph Osai, former 2nd-round pick, Miles Murphy, former 1st-round pick, and Shamar Stewart, the team's most recent 1st-round pick, has generated a pressure on 9.1% of their collective pass rush snaps. That is just simply not good enough, especially given the investments that they were. These are not, hey, we're hoping day 3, 6th and 7th rounders can just keep us afloat. These are supposed to be the running mates to Trey Hendrickson, and none of those 3 have really lived up to their potential. I think Joseph Osai, ironically, who is the guy picked later than Miles Murphy or Shamar Stewart, is second on the team at edge rusher in pressures with 15. He's played pretty decent football, but the other 2, they need to play better for the Cincinnati Bengals team to just stay alive in the AFC playoff race. Baltimore Ravens, another team that needs more from a former 1st-rounder. Baltimore Ravens, Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman had 846 yards in 2024. Like, he looked like, okay, they got Zay Flowers. He is that ultra twitchy kind of slot receiver, but can be a number 1 in kind of an Amon-Ra St. Brown type way. And then Rashad Bateman has that 4.3 speed, can win on the outside. He can be a really good number 2, right? He has 11 catches for 120 yards and 1 touchdown entering week 7. Now, of course, no Lamar Jackson for the last, 2 games is a problem. They're going into their bye week. They can kind of regroup, and they understand what's ahead of them. They're 1-5. They need to start winning football games and string off 5 or 6 in a row at least. But Rashad Bateman to really not be involved in the offense at all, even before Lamar Jackson got hurt. Very surprising. And Isaiah Likely has played the last, I think, 3 games, 3 catches for 18 yards. Like, Isaiah Likely needs to give the offense more than that. Those 2 players, I guess I'm kind of sort of calling them out, but they need to play better for the Ravens to go on what would be like a historic run to even making a playoff spot at this point. And I don't know if they're still the favorite in the AFC North. I'm assuming the Steelers would be at this point with such a big lead. But we all feel like when healthy, the Ravens are as good as any team in football. They need better play from their pass catchers beyond Zay Flowers and beyond Mark Andrews. Pittsburgh Steelers. All right, so early in the season, that week 1 game, the Jets score 30-plus points. Justin Fields looks good. It's a big hit by Jalen Ramsey late in the game on that 4th down on the Jets' final drive that seals the win for the Jets. Or for the Steelers, I'm sorry, against the Jets. Next week, defense not as good. And it's like, man, what's wrong with this defense? And then Alex Highsmith goes down, and it's like, man, does not look like the Pittsburgh Steelers defense that we've seen for the last 50 years. Well, let me tell you, from week 2 to week 6, so after the Jets scored 30-plus points on them, the Steelers are 4th in EPA per play allowed on defense. So the defense is fine. Aaron Rodgers is not playing like even 2019 Aaron Rodgers, but he's playing good enough. The offensive line, good enough. DK Metcalf making some plays downfield. Jalen Warren, Kenneth Gainwell, good multi-dimensional backs. We saw a little bit of Caleb Johnson in week 6. But let's not write off the Steelers defense at this point. Nick Herbig, I think, is just as good as Alex Highsmith. And now you have Highsmith back, Herbig, TJ Watt, Derek Harmon is back from injury. Unsurprisingly, as a team is getting healthier, they're playing better football. That's one thing I'll just say very quickly here as an aside. It's not about the Steelers. I think the biggest problems and mistakes in analysis that we see in probably all of pro sports, but I'll just specialize for the NFL because that's the field that I'm in and I've been in for a long time. The biggest mistakes made when it comes to analysis of teams is that we tend to forget about injuries. We see a team like earlier in the season, the Kansas City Chiefs are not really functioning at a high level or to their standard offensively. And it's, oh man, the Chiefs offense is broken. It's bad. Well, yeah, there was no Xavier Worthy who got hurt on the second play of the season. There was no Rashee Rice. Hollywood Brown gets hurt. Well, yeah, once those guys return and the players that we know have been quality players are on the field, usually teams rebound. The Steelers, Alex Highsmith goes down. No Derek Harmon to start the season. They have other injuries, and then suddenly they're healthy, and it's like, oh, man, well, the Steelers are back. Well, yeah, their players are back. So don't fall victim to grouping a team into specific labels when it's, oh, yeah, the Baltimore, do we really think the Baltimore Ravens are an offense that is only going to muster 3 points at home very often? No. When it's a quarterback, it's easy. Okay, well, it's the quarterback, so yeah. But when it's a specific group on defense, it's a wide receiver group, it's a running back group, it's not correct, or I don't think it's smart to label a specific group not good or a team not good in a certain area when they don't have anywhere close to the regular bodies that they want out there. Cleveland Browns, last team on all 32 in the AFC North. They need to start Shedeur Sanders, which I get that seems like, okay, they've already run through 2 quarterbacks. They traded Joe Flacco. Just let Dylan Gabriel, give him a chance. Dylan Gabriel has 2 big-time throws and 5 turnover-worthy plays in his 2 starts. He's averaging 4.8 yards per attempt. Have there been a few throws that have been at the intermediate level that have gotten through? Sure. Have 90% of his throws look like either first read checkdowns or I'm not sure what to do, so I'm just going to check it down? In watching his film, that's what I've seen. I don't want to say what he's shown proves that he can't play in the NFL. I think he's operated the offense okay. I mean, the guy played 60 games in college at 3 different schools. I would hope that he would be a little bit more acclimated to running an offense as opposed to a 21-year-old quarterback who's barely played in college. But I just don't think he's the answer. And maybe the Browns are I don't know, they're 1-5. I don't want to say they're not looking for answers, but I think Shedeur Sanders gives them more of an opportunity to like utilize an entire playbook and not just be check down, screen, maybe a seam shot to David Njoku that's a hospital ball, drag route to Jerry Jeudy, check down, screen, check down. Like Dylan Gabriel is just, to me, does not have an NFL arm. He's not very mobile. He has decent anticipatory skills, but that's really it. So I think, I'm saying it now, maybe this feels too early. The Browns should start Shedeur Sanders and just let him ride out his rookie year. AFC South, here on All 32, jumping over to that division. Tennessee Titans. I feel bad for Cam Ward. I mean, he seems like the ultimate competitor. No nonsense rookie. Doesn't feel like he's arrived. Isn't worried about anything besides football. He sees his head coach, Brian Callahan, who I tweeted right after the season, after what happened with Will Levis last year, and that Callahan was supposed to be this quarterback whisperer. I tweeted, I'm surprised that Brian Callahan was not fired, like was not a one and done, because the offense was that bad. It didn't matter who was playing quarterback last year. And now his head coach is gone. It's the same GM, which helps that it's not totally, new faces looking at him. There's at least the GM who drafted him, but his roster is just so bad. I mean, Calvin Ridley is making an obscene amount of money. He's still pretty good, but he's not great. Alec Manor, maybe he can be a decent player, but in general, as a 4th-round pick, he's just a guy. I mean, he's out there. He's getting production because he's running a ton of routes. He's not super efficient. The offensive line is The defense is pretty good at times, especially when Jeffrey Simmons is really rolling, and he usually is. But Cam Ward's sack rate is 11% right now because he's just not seeing anybody open, and he leads the NFL in time sacked. I think it's probably going to be the case that he will end up as the most sacked quarterback in football this season. I feel bad for Cam Ward. Indianapolis Colts. I'm going to be quick here. I want to talk about Jonathan Taylor, Daniel Jones playing good game management football, the defense being very opportunistic, getting a lot of turnovers. You can talk about Quentin Nelson up front, that he's a future Hall of Fame guard. I want to focus on Tanner Bortolini. It's hard. I always want to say Tatter for some reason. Tanner Bortolini, fellow Italian, at center. 4th-round pick out of Wisconsin a few years ago. I vividly remember scouting him. Loved his athleticism. And when you're at Wisconsin, you are going to be very well versed in a diverse run blocking scheme. I was a little concerned about his strength. And I do think at times Bortolini still in year 2 shows that he needs to get stronger. But when you watch the Colts, if you're into watching run games, and I mean, Jonathan Taylor is probably leading the offensive player of the year race right now. You can watch Quentin Nelson, number 56. Watch the guy next to him, Tanner Bortolini, how quickly and under control he gets to the second level. He's been a linchpin of what to me has been the most consistent run game in football through 6 weeks. Houston Texans. Last week I talked about CJ Stroud starting to heat up a little bit. And I think a big reason is they're starting to incorporate more than just Nico Collins into this offense. Stephon Diggs is gone. Tank Dell still recovering from injury. And we don't know if Tank Dell will ever be the same again after all the injuries he's had at his slight frame. The last 3 weeks, Christian Kirk has 10 catches for 109 yards. Xavier Hutchinson has 2 touchdowns. Jalen Noel has a touchdown. Jaden Higgins has a touchdown. These are the players that we expected were going to be the beneficiaries of Nico Collins drawing so much attention from the opposition's defensive backfield. So if those secondary targets continue to play at a quality level, and we're starting to see some touchdowns, good efficiency, yards per route run figures being relatively high, then I think the Houston Texans will continue this little quiet, sneaky run that they're on and start to play some really good football and maybe get back in there in the AFC South race. All right, last team in the AFC South before we get to the last division for all 32 here in week 6, Jacksonville Jaguars. I don't really know how good they are. I mean, they get the huge win, one of their biggest wins in the last 10 years on Monday Night Football against the Kansas City Chiefs just a week ago, a game that I didn't think Trevor Lawrence played particularly well in. but made some big plays when the Jaguars needed it most. He plays better, I thought, this past week. They lose. And in watching the film and looking at the analytics, I'm like, how is this team? Like, what's up with this team? Like, they're 4-2. They have Josh Hines-Allen, who's like right below the elite tier of edge rushers. Devin Lloyd is playing great football at linebacker. What's up with this team on defense? The defensive backs are not good. Like, they have a problem there. I loved Monteric Brown out of Arkansas about like 2 or 3 years ago. He's one of the corners. They trade Tyson Campbell, who they extended just a few years ago, for Greg Newsome. That's basically a wash. Like, they're 25 years old. They're the same guy, basically. And then they have Travis Hunter. And he's kind of like probably a better, I mean, we don't know. Is he a better receiver? Is he a better corner? He's not able to play corner that much. He only played 17 snaps last week. So that's the one issue. I said every team has flaws. The issue for the Jaguars, I don't think really is the offense. It's the offensive line. I mean, at times Trevor Lawrence makes some too many head scratching decisions for being such a, prize number 1 overall pick and prize prospect. But on defense, good front seven. The Olakun is one of the most consistent players around the football. At linebacker, Devin Lloyd's playing out of his mind. The defensive backs are that team's flaw at this point. Now moving to the last division here on the Week 6 edition of All 32, the Denver Broncos. This is kind of like beating a dead horse, but I have concerns about Bo Nix. He has 6 big-time throws to 7 turnover-worthy plays entering Week 7. His yards per attempt average last season was 6.7. You want it to be at 7 or close to 8 if you're talking about a Pro Bowl or an all-pro caliber quarterback. So if you're in a rookie season at 6.7, fine. It's at 6.2 right now. And it just feels like Bo Nix is an extension of Sean Payton on the field, that was the scouting report because of all the games he played and what he did in that final season at Oregon. But I'm seeing him make too many mistakes. I'm seeing him still try to do too much at times. It's almost like he gets bored with just operating within the structure of Sean Payton's scheme. And the accuracy is not really there. I think the skill position talent is pretty good. Cortland Sutton is a true number 1. You got Marvin Mims. You got his former Oregon receiver, Troy Franklin. Good running back room. J.K. Dobbins has ran it well. R.J. Harvey can be a really fun, multi-dimensional back. But to me, Bo Nix has taken a step back. The only thing he's super duper good at, avoiding sacks. He has a 10.3, wanted to make sure I got that right, 10.3% pressure to sack rate, which is one of the lowest in the league. So the athleticism that we saw at Auburn and then at Oregon and in his rookie season is manifesting itself the most by way of just not getting sacked when he's pressured. But in every other element of his game, I think Bo Nix has actually taken a step back individually in his second season through 6 games. Kansas City Chiefs. The one thing that I've noticed watching Patrick Mahomes, and the numbers back it up, is that for as much as his average depth of target is higher than it's been the last 3 or 4 years when they've really played a lot of small ball, Tyquan Thornton is a big part of that. Xavier Worthy coming back is a big part of that. And really, the Chiefs said that it would be an emphasis this season to start getting back to that long ball. But that's really not what I have taken away the most from watching Patrick Mahomes, is that the small ball is still there. He's averaging 2.83 seconds to throw the football, which seems like very high. Like in the prime of the Tom Brady in the pocket era, Brady, Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers, they would be like in the low 2s, like 2.3, 2.2, 2.4. But when you're Mahomes and you factor in 5 to 10 at least times that he's running around, making guys miss, holding onto the football, if you're at 2.83, that's really quick. He is getting the ball out more often than not very quickly. And in fact, 2.83 seconds average time to throw for Patrick Mahomes is the second lowest that he's averaged in his NFL career, besides his rookie season when he threw 50 touchdowns and won the MVP. So his second season, but his first year as a starter back in 2018. So in watching the Chiefs, you're wondering, oh, why is Mahomes not getting sacked that much? How is this offense getting more efficient than it was the last couple of years when it looked kind of hard for this offense at times? That was early in the Mahomes era, the best offense in football by far. Well, he's getting the ball out quicker. Last year, he was holding it and having to hold it more frequently on a down-to-down basis. We are still getting the Mahomes magic at times where he's, running left, doesn't like what he sees, reverses his field, and finds someone. But in terms of just the true pass sets where he's just catching the ball, getting it out, within the structure of the play, it's been faster than we've ever seen since his first full season as a starter in 2018. Los Angeles Chargers, I want to highlight my guy, Ladd McConkey. He had 7 catches for 100 yards and 1 touchdown in the Chargers' last-second win over the Dolphins in Week 6. I think he is just the consummate wide receiver. He does everything well. Now, he's not necessarily going to be someone that's going to rebound it over a 6'1" corner too often, but you use him in the slot. You use him outside. He'll beat press coverage. He understands to throttle down if he recognizes zone, and he recognizes it very quickly. He catches the football and gets upfield. He can make a defender miss or two. He can plant his foot in the ground. He has good speed. He can hit the big play. We saw him do that on that 40-plus yarder that ultimately got the Chargers into field goal range to beat the Dolphins, which is a shallow cross. I mean, Justin Herbert made a spectacular play to stay up and get the ball out while he was getting sacked. But Ladd McConkey just catches the ball, slams on the brakes, makes a defender miss, accelerates up the field. I think Ladd McConkey is, I don't want to say as good as any receiver in football, but he is such a good security blanket for Justin Herbert to have, who can also be a high-volume 3-level winner in the NFL. And the last team here on Week 6's edition of All 32, the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, they're 2-4. They did come off a win, so I'm going to go positive. And there's no, I just pick whatever I find interesting. I'm not trying to be negative or positive either way for any of these teams. They've gotten quality production out of their 3rd-round pick, Darian Porter, Eric Stokes, and their other cornerbacks through these first 6 games. That Darian Porter has played 54 snaps in coverage, and the long and athletic and explosive, almost Tariq Woolen-like prospect from Iowa State on those 54 pass rush snaps has allowed 1 catch for 9 yards. Eric Stokes has played quality football. For a team that we don't really think of this as a unit that's had a bunch of stars in the secondary lately, and they lose Trayvon Merrick in free agency, their best secondary player at safety last year. The Raiders, I think, are starting to sort of put the pieces together on the defensive side. Max Crosby's still a madman. Malcolm Kuhn's playing good football. It's a group that doesn't have a lot of star power, but hats off to the corners who didn't have a lot of fanfare coming into the season. And Eric Stokes, I don't want to call him a bust, but a failed first-round pick, late first-rounder in 2021 by the Packers. He's also played pretty good football as well. So the Las Vegas Raiders, they got to get things right offensively, and they got the Chiefs coming up. It's not going to be an easy game whatsoever. But I think in the secondary, they're more formidable and will continue to be that way throughout this season. All right, that'll do it for me today. I'm Chris Trapasso. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to like and subscribe to get this video and get this show every single week, along with following me on TikTok. I would highly appreciate it. This was All 32. I'm Chris Trapasso. Thanks for watching.